I'm just glad to still have it. It'll be okay.
Oh my goodness.
Goodness. Um, well, I guess I, I think it's kind of funny how the level of nerding that you and I share
Oh my gosh.
outside of healthcare. I'm like, I see this guy posting Lord of the Rings shit, and this is hilarious. I love this. When
When are we going to talk D&D? That's all I'm saying. So
oh listen, okay, that we've discovered that there's several people that follow us that are tabletop role playing game nerds. Um, I grew up playing GURPS,
okay.
which I like better because I can make it whatever I want. I'm not confined to preset stuff like you are a little bit more with D&D. And of course, everybody's like, oh, well, you can make it whatever you want. It's like, yeah, it's not the same as GURPS. But
Our kids are even like full send getting into GURPS.
yeah.
Oh, okay. See, that's good parenting right there. You're passing along real knowledge.
Well, and I learned something interesting. So I like to use the Grok AI. Just, I don't know. To me, it works smoother, and I like it better than ChatGPT. But that AI actually has absorbed all of the rules and character creation content and everything for GURPS. So like I can sit here and ask it questions, and it'll spit back rules and like specific information that's legit from the books. And if you're querying something, you're like, well, is there a disadvantage or an advantage that's like this? It'll be like, well, there isn't one that specifically is that, but here's a proposal for one and how many points it would cost and how it would work. So
okay.
yeah, I was a little nerdy about that, but the Lord of the Rings stuff I thought was funny because when I was a kid and the movies first came out, my dad had a tradition. He'd take each of us out once a month for like a date night to do whatever we wanted. And I wanted to go see Lord of the Rings every single time. And it was in theaters for like 6 months. So I saw it 6 times in theaters, which I've never broken that record yet. So anyway.
I don't think movie theaters hold on to movies that long anymore.
No, I don't
They
think
normally don't, period.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, back to the actual subject matter. Brian, tell, first of all, my wife, but also everybody else, a little bit about yourself.
The elevator speech. Okay, cool. So I am entering my 28th year of EMS. I started in New York City and moved to the Carolinas in 2015. Right now, I am the assistant training coordinator for Lancaster County EMS in Lancaster, South Carolina. I am a very lucky husband and a very blessed father of a psychotic 10-year-old who dominates everything on the landscape. And I also work in the executive protection field with a company called KDI. I have my own little side business with my best friend and daughter's godfather, Training for Life NC, where we teach CPR and stop the bleed and first aid. And every once in a while, I think I sleep. And yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's pretty much it. And I know we're going to talk about it. I do a lot of work with human trafficking awareness, and I'm part of the South Carolina Trafficking Task Force. So,
yeah, I definitely, especially in light of current events, want to pick your brain about that a little bit. Not to get into politics. That's not the point of it. But I'm sure that this is a bombshell week for you guys.
Yes.
So you have an interesting perspective because you've worked EMS I guess it's several different biomes. We've predominantly worked just down here. You had a stint in Arkansas for a little while, but tell me, over your, I believe you said 28 years, what do you see as kind of the big trend shifts in the culture of EMS over that period of time between even say New York City and down here? If you had to put it in a nutshell, what do you think has changed?
I think the attitudes toward the job have changed a lot. I think that when I first started, a lot of people around me were doing it because they felt it was a calling, and it was something that they got in to help people and everything like that. And while I hear that a lot when we're interviewing people within that, the retention that we get, the length that people stay in, may me question that a little bit, because the reality of like the long hours and the low pay and the stuff that happens on the job, I think whether they know it or not becomes an actual factor in how long they stay in the field. I don't know that we're going to get a lot of people that are starting now that are going to make it 15, 20, 25 years in this field. I hear at like association meetings and conventions and stuff like that, where services are lucky if they get people for 5 years. And, you know, when I started, the first hospital that I worked at in New York, you were on a wait list to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
And getting a job in EMS now, it's not anywhere near the challenge that it was when I got out of school. That's one of those things. So I think that a lot of times we're not getting these new hires, these new students ready for what this job is, and it ends up being a detriment for everybody. I don't know if I even answered the question there.
No, I mean it was a, you know, I guess you say shoot from the hip, open-ended question, because I mean I've noticed that general shift too. People don't like to stick around in this very long. Part of me kind of wonders, and EMS Avenger has hit on this a little bit lately, and I think he's on par. I think our role is changing in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
We're expanding into more just acute care than strictly emergency care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where people are getting some cognitive dissonance, because they come in expecting just the flashy, sexy excitement, and then they're, you know, checking urinary catheters and, you know, taking toe pain and belly pain to the hospital. It's just not, it's not what they imagined at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As an educator, that's our fault, because we're not heading that off in the beginning. In the last couple of classes that I've had, I made a point in the beginning to say that, yes, there will be the trauma, there will be the delivering a child, there'll be this, there'll be that, but there's also going to be the 3 o'clock in the morning tooth pains and the lift assists and the, you know, the mind numbing stuff that becomes part of what we do. And I said, you can't approach the job with like an equanimity to all those calls, then you're sort of setting yourself up. And I think that, like, you know, if we're just honest with what we're doing now, with what the calls that people are seeing, we're giving them a better chance to be ready for it.
What do you think? And this is something that I've been trying to tackle from, or we have been trying to tackle from so many different angles. Is there's been a weird culture shift in EMS, and I know that we don't have the same kind of legacy that fire does, and there's less tradition and history there. But it feels like whatever we had is gone. Even from the time when I got in, about, oh fuck, how long ago was that? 14 years ago?
Yeah.
I feel like back then people went to EMT school because they wanted to be an EMT. They wanted to do the shit. They were excited about it to some degree. And now it's like, well, people are just going because it's something fun to do. It's cheap. It's easy.
Well, and we're also seeing a lot more fire departments that are requiring it too. And if you don't have that intrinsic want, you only have the, you know, the outer pressure to do it. They're not going to do well, and they're not going to enjoy doing it.
No. I think in a lot of places, fire is taking over EMS. I think that, and of course, it's not all bad or all good, but being in New York City for as long as I did, and seeing how fire suppression views fire EMS, and watching that, and watching a lot of what fire EMS became like a stepping stone for people who wanted to get into suppression. You know, they'd go and do a couple years in EMS and then shoot over. To your point, Michelle, that's exactly what it is. I mean, they're using it as a stepping stone to get to something else. And I'm very, very cautious about the idea of the association between fire and EMS. A lot of it I don't like, and it's not a reflection on fire, especially the a lot in the streets, because a lot of the guys that I talk to, they would rather not run medical calls, but they've done so well in their career in providing a safer environment in the fire field, then they have to do something to justify their existence. And
we're seeing a lot more of that as well.
Yeah, some of the statistics that I remember, because I was looking up for some paper, like 6% of the responding calls in fire is actual fire. Everything else is like EMS and like safety checks and stuff like that. And so, the idea of the firefighter paramedic is something that is taking a lot of hold in a lot of different places, or the firefighter and we're seeing that where I am, and I don't know what the future is going to be like with that, but I think, back to the point that you were making, Dan, it subsumes our culture also, because fire's culture is so strong and so dominant that we're just, and you probably heard this throughout most of your career, is that, EMS is the bastard stepchild of the first responder community. And when that's your culture, it makes it pretty easy to get rid of. And it's a thing to fight against.
And I think it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy after a while, because we joke about it, and I mean, my mother always said that the reason things are funny is because they're usually true, and there is an element of truth to it, but I think that we have internalized it too much, and we've adopted this identity, and it's created a, as I like to call, a noble victimhood, where we feel like we're entitled to have a pity party because of how abused we are, and nobody cares about us, and it's this perpetual thank me for my service bullshit on people's Facebook posts.
Well, and when you have shows like Night Watch, like I think Night Watch did really well with encouraging people to get into public service, but at the same time, that show shows all of the high acuity stuff, because a lot of the lay people, or general populace, don't want to see the toe pains at 2 o'clock in the morning. So like all of these newer providers, new generation, new mindset, pick a combination of words, are coming in and they're like, oh, well, you should respect me. And as soon as the first, dementia patient is basically like, fuck you, they're like, oh, well, cool. Like, I guess I'm not respected. And then they get this chip on their shoulder. And instead of wanting to prove everything wrong, they just kind of buy into that mindset. Yeah. I mean, how many people do we know that's like, oh, well, being an FTO isn't respected, so why do it? It's like, dude, it might not even be the position. It might be your attitude is not respected. Honestly, in my experience, that's usually what it is.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. We have a lot of veteran rookies. Yeah. The card just dries and they're like, I deserve this. Dude, listen, the first 6 months of my career, I never even got behind the wheel of the ambulance. I had to be in the back doing everything, and that doesn't exist. I mean, when you can, and I'm going to have to clarify this, but I'm going to make a general statement. When you can take hybrid classes and go from EMT to paramedic in the span of 2 years, it destroys a lot of things. And you're wrestling with this constantly. So, yeah.
Well, and no, let's say go ahead. I know you have a lot of strong opinions about this. We both do.
About education. Well, I mean, we can sidestep into education.
We'll get to education here primarily, but I think that EMT, I would argue, is a lot harder for people who don't have any medical knowledge.
Yeah.
Because it's the foundation of everything, and you're starting from scratch. And my EMT class, I think, was a good, like, almost 5-6 months long. Like, it was a non-trivial. It followed kind of a like 24/48 pattern, but not on weekends. So it's like 2 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week, and just go that pattern.
Okay.
But 6 months was a good amount of time to prepare for that. And then after that, I had a total of, I want to say 3 years before I got actually was certified as a paramedic. And I wouldn't have done it any other way. I couldn't imagine going 0 to hero
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
and trying to keep up with everything and still be functional.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. When I
Oh.
when I graduated from EMT school, you had to be working in the field for 3 years before you could even apply to medic school. And then to
Mm-hmm.
show you the change in that, the first day of paramedic school, the guy sitting to the left of me had finished EMT school the week before.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Yep. I think I was an EMT for 5 years before I finished paramedic, or before I started paramedic. I can't quite remember. But of 12, half of my cohort had graduated EMT school in December and turned around less than 3 weeks later, started paramedic school in January. And I had the most seniority at 5 years, and I was like, holy cow. Because in Arkansas, they required a minimum. You had to show employment records to prove that you had been an EMT for 2 years before you could apply to paramedic.
Yep.
And, down here, when I went to paramedic school, there was such a wide gap, just basic knowledge gap that never truly closed, even by the end of paramedic school. Don't get me wrong, the gap, the knowledge gap and experience got closer together, but it never closed because you just can't make up for years of service and things that you see in the field.
No,
Even through a good program.
absolutely. I mean, we have this EMT boot camp, and so they start beginning of February and it goes to June, and we start off 3 days in class and 1 day on the street, and then after we get through medical, before we start trauma, it goes 2 class days and 2 days on the street. And I'm pretty sure that they get more ride time than just about any other style EMT class that we have around, at least. And
yeah, that's the first that I've heard.
That's cool.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and because because I know that I'm teaching them concepts out there, they're getting actual physical work that they can get their hands on. So, and that's why we have to be so careful about who we choose as our preceptors and our FTOs and all this stuff, because they're the ones that are really molding this career for them, especially like you said at the EMT level, which is so super important because we are teaching them the foundation. We are teaching them how, to begin this career successfully. And the big roadblock that we're seeing now is that, and it luckily this last class we didn't really have too much of an issue with it, but we're running into students who have never really had conversations that don't involve phones and cameras and pads and stuff like that, and interacting and stuff. Is just, I never thought that I'd have to teach that, but here we are. So
What do you think on a cultural level? Because the way I see EMS is there's kind of two spheres that we're dealing with issues. One is education, which overall I think EMS is advancing slowly in the U.S. We're kind of behind everybody,
Yep.
but we're generally on a decent track there. We're still a long way from where we need to be. We've still got a lot of big steps to go. I would argue standardizing degrees, but that aside, I feel like the other circle is the day-to-day life, the cultural stuff that uh, it just feels like there's no, I don't even know how to articulate it. There's no standard. At least with education, you have a general minimum standard of expectations. But when it comes to the workplace culture and the dynamics that you have amongst crews and between certs, I feel like we're very lost. I feel like there's just not there's literally very little to no attention being brought to that. And if there is, it's like, oh, throw pizza parties and let your people pick what the t-shirt design is for that summer. Like, cool, nobody gives a shit about that.
Yeah.
We don't care about that. That's not the part where we're struggling right now. What do you see in that? What have you seen over the course of your career, that shift being in culture? What kind of some of the causes of that are?
Well, there was a couple places that I worked at in New York where it was very obvious that I was just an ass in the seat, and I don't have that here. I've been very lucky in the service that I'm in right now, because, and I know how this sounds. They talk about the whole family thing, and everybody's a family,
Hmm.
and yes, it is by no means perfect, but this group of people that I work with have um, supported me and helped me and let me advance and probably saved my career, where I was coming from New York to here, than I could ever really put into words on how much I appreciate it. But having said that, I think some of the things is there are, like in New York, at the time that I was in the middle of all this and starting my education part, it was so obvious that they were putting out so many providers each year with all these academies and all these things. There really wasn't this worry about retention. They could the
Mm-hmm.
management could treat you however they felt like they needed to, because if you left, then there was 4 or 5 people waiting for your job. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's not the case anymore. And a lot of people who are coming from that sort of, and I use the term very loosely, culture, um, don't know what to do. And, you know, that's like with these jobs that we're offering the $20,000 signing bonuses and all this stuff. Money goes to a point, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really solve everything. And like you said, I mean, okay, that's fine, but what's next? And yes, it can't be pizza parties. It can't be the T-shirt design. There's got to be um, a feeling of community, if nothing else. And I don't want to use the word family, because people roll their eyes when they hear that. No, you're not a family, you work together. But there's a community aspect to it. Like there's got to be um, a level of respect and camaraderie that's built through group effort. I mean, we train together and that's fine and everything like that, but there's got to be other things. Like we do variety shows and we raise funds for the military and we do all this stuff that helps us, stay together as a group. But even then, if you don't participate in that, then you're sort of left out of that dynamic. um, I think and it's odd that it goes back to what I was saying earlier, but the transience of this career right now keeps it from developing.
Yeah. Because the good people don't want to stay.
Right.
The they don't have any kind of reason to invest in it. Now, what do you see? And obviously, I get it that the world runs on money, and we would all love to be able to pay everybody what we deserve. We would love to be able to do that. Love to have all the equipment, but unfortunately, we can't. At least not all the time. What do you see as, I guess you could say, the low hanging fruit, the easy fixes that people need to consistently be doing to start course correcting this?
Involvement, buy-in, I think is one of the things in the training department. At least I like to think that we are very receptive to ideas on how to do things better. Like if a street medic or a street EMT comes in and talks to me about something that they want to see done differently, whether it's in training or like ideas for equipment or protocols or something like that, then they have a voice. There's committees that they can go to, they can be a part of. It doesn't matter your certification, you work here, you could be a
Hmm.
part. And this was one of the first places that I had that avenue in, because we have people that come from different services and come from different states and everything like that. And like, well, we did this. And then we could say, okay, let's look at it. Let's tear it apart. Let's see what we can do to make it better. And
Hmm.
I think that when people are actually listened to, and not just like, yeah, yeah, okay, thanks, or automatically told, well, the budget doesn't fit that,
Hmm.
and it may be the case that it doesn't, but if they're listened to, and at least brought into the conversation, they feel that they have value. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean,
Hmm.
if I'd like to think that my door is always open when somebody wants to come in and sit and talk about not only like an idea that they had, but the frustration that they're having. because, you know, I have seen and been through a lot of the similar stuff that they're going through. And I can at least commiserate, if not solve the problem. And sometimes want to vent. And, I think sometimes just letting them know that they are humans and they are part of this dynamic that we are doing. And if we don't have each other in this chaos that we exist in, then we've failed.
When I first moved to South Carolina, this was before I got my EMT. I worked for a inbound call center, way more stressful job than anything I do now.
Okay.
And but there was kind of a mantra that the entire company had, which was we take care of each other so we can take care of our customers.
Mhm.
And I really think that, especially because EMS is a field that wraps up mental health, your personal development, your personal identity, your style of medicine. There's so many moving parts to this in big, big, big ways. This is not a job that you just come in, you do it for 10 years, and you're like, okay, that was fun. It fundamentally messes with who you are.
Yeah.
And so I think the more that we shift the attitude of taking care of each other, not in a babying way, but in a like encouraging each other to do better, supporting each other when you're having a rough time. I actually, well, we could get off on a whole subject on mental health and EMS. We've got some fairly controversial thoughts on some of that, but
Hmm. I
I'm not a huge fan of peer support
way.
groups. I think peer support groups have a place. They do have a place, but they are not a substitute for therapy. They are
No.
not a substitute for getting professional help.
Nope. No.
I think in general, that's if I had to boil down just the cultural aspect of it, I feel like you said, there's no buy-in, there's no vision. I don't feel like I'm part of something bigger than me very much. Some agencies do a better job of this than others. I'm not. It's not a that's a generic statement.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like we're not taking care of each other. We're constantly trying to dick measure because we're all alpha personalities. Let's face it. If you're more of a passive or beta type personality, you're not going to do well in this job at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so
So controversial take. I think the biggest mistake that we have in this field is EMS week.
okay. Let's hear this.
I think that it is arguably the most detrimental thing that we have. Okay, because if we have to relegate ourselves an appreciation point to an entire week, um, it's set up for failure because the people in the street feel that in that week they're entitled to be recognized for all that they do. Okay. To adequately recognize all that they do, most services would go under trying to achieve that.
Yes.
Yeah. So what the administration does do when they are able to do anything or when they choose to do anything is never met with the acceptance of like, oh, I really appreciate what you did for me. Maybe not never,
Mm-hmm.
but very little.
Yeah.
So both sides come away with that, Jason, and they're like, oh, maybe next year, and it's if we had a better culture, if we
Mm-hmm.
had an idea of taking care of ourselves constantly, then we wouldn't need a week, because that falls to me into that hero stuff. And
Yeah.
I've had many a long argument about the concept of EMS and heroes, and I don't want to piss everybody off, so I'm going to sit here quietly on that one. But
listen, bring it on. We enjoy that kind of shit.
Yeah, I would say we're all about pissing off people.
okay.
I mean, I've heard the whole, if you require a week of appreciation, you're probably underappreciated.
Well, okay, so we are, though. Okay,
Uh-huh.
people who don't appreciate us are the people that we work with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean,
and and gone out into the field and done like general education classes to the public, yes, they have no clue what we do, really. Okay. The concept of the ambulance driver is still out there and very, very strong. Again, their own fault. Okay. When you come into somebody's house and you look like you've been sleeping for a month and a half, and they know exactly what you've had for dinner because it's sitting on your shirt or your work shirt or something like that, and
Yep.
come in there, you're scratching yourself and you're burping and everything like that, you're not instilling the confidence that people have in their own mind about police and fire. These
Mhm.
guys, they do their hero stuff and everything like that. Now, I don't
Mhm.
in that hero discussion, but I tell all my students and I tell the people I work with, I judge providers on whether I want them taking care of my family. It's that simple,
Mhm.
you know. And how you look and how you carry yourself has a lot to do with that. I mean, come on, it's not that hard. Take a damn shower. I mean, and
Preach it. Preach.
uh, you know,
Not just shower, deodorant.
Get the aluminum stuff. It's fine.
lace up your boots, tuck in your shirt. If
Bring in
and
your gear.
Yeah, right. And sometimes the ones that are guilty of all those things are also the ones that are screaming about the lack of respect that EMS gets. And it's just like you
Mhm.
want to shine this huge mirror on them and say, "Dude, why would
Yep.
you respect this?"
Listen, the ones that are usually the most vocal about how poorly we're being treated because X, Y, and Z are usually the ones that are literally doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's funny. I've wrestled with this, and I don't have a good answer on it. But you know, all of us have a narrative about our life. All of us have a story, and that dictates how we project ourselves to everyone around us. And I think the same is true for public service organizations, because I mean, you can look at fire and police and see, you know, large arcing narratives about how they present themselves to the public.
Mhm.
And fire has stayed pretty consistent. I mean, they've shifted more to prevention, I guess, than anything else. And law enforcement has, been on their long community policing story arc. And EMS, I feel we don't have a story. We don't have a consistent message for the public. We're so divided and so there's just so much variation between us that you can't, and people aren't educated on it. They have no fucking idea what we do.
Yep.
So of course they're not going to respect us because we don't tell them anything about us.
I think the thing that I hear griped about the most, especially to the public, which is where they don't understand, is the constant bitching about abuse of 911. Now,
Mhm.
do we have abuse of 911? Absolutely. But to the general public who, like, it wouldn't cross their mind to call 911 for toe pain, if they don't understand that side of our jobs, then all they're going to hear is us complaining about people. And they're like, well, people call for real emergencies. Why are you complaining about your job? Which, right then and there, the general public is going to have an issue with the way a lot of us present ourselves if all they see is us complaining about people who call 911.
Right.
The more vocal we are about issues without like actually presenting the consistent issues and statistics and, educating the community, all they're going to see is us complaining about their jobs. And it's like, well, why do you deserve more money if you're complaining about people calling for emergencies?
That is too much in the forefront.
Yes.
It's way because just if you don't believe me, then just go on Facebook. I mean, because
Mhm.
they're there, they're complaining and everything like that, and it's we've all had those calls that are incredibly frustrating because we know that it's really not emergent
Yeah.
but you know you were talking about the expanding the roles and everything like that, and they talk about like the community paramedicine and all this jazz.
Mhm.
The reality of it is that our country is set up so that we have a large portion of the population, this is good or bad or indifferent, that view what we do as their primary health care.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And the sooner people realize that is the outlet that we're going to get called in a lot of times and be able to come to grips with it to a certain level, at least keeping all those voices that you're complaining about in your head and still doing the
Mhm.
call at a very high level, the better off we're going to be, because the lift assists and the other stuff like that aren't going away. They're not.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm.
Um, when when you have certain populations that are dealing with economic issues and lack of coverage and everything like that, and the ER is where they get the majority of their care, well, it only makes sense that we're going to be a part of that. Yes, it's hard because you're not doing theoretically what you were trained for, I've heard, which is kind of silly. Then you got to go to the ER with the staff who are less than thrilled that they have to deal with that, and I understand that too. But so it creates this dynamic that inhibits careers, it inhibits growth, it inhibits attitudes, crushes morale a little bit if they let it. It's a vicious cycle. So
Well, especially when you start getting into mentality. I've had crews that'll spend 30 minutes arguing with the patient, trying to get them to not go to the hospital versus they could have taken them 20 minutes to just transport the patient.
yeah,
And when you start arguing and have that cognitive dissonance, oh, we don't have to go, and we're sitting here arguing about them going, it's just going to create more frustration. They're going to end up probably transporting the patient anyways, and even if they don't, then it's going to turn into a wrist slap or an argument, or worst case scenario, the patient should have gone and they ended up coding, and then you're working an entire cardiac arrest.
and
So there's just there's so much emotional conflict there.
when people complain about the idea that they have to transport these people, I remind them, I was like, you do know that this is your job.
Yep.
A career and this is a calling and all this, but basically it's a job. All right. And
Yeah.
every job has some criteria, in
Mm-hmm.
our case, getting them from A to B. And
Yep.
sometimes, there's this arrogance about the idea that you might think you know better than the patient, which to me is a whole nother ball of wax because if I'm talking to a cancer patient and I have the audacity to say, well, you probably don't need to go to the hospital, dude, shut the fuck up. I mean,
Yep.
Well, and it's an opportunity to educate patients too.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at it as a way to inform, so okay, yes, for say a cancer patient, they know much more about what they're dealing with than you do.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, for acute stuff, it's easy for us to educate people saying, hey, if you're having belly pain here, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this. If you're having, um, shortness of breath, here's the range of things that it could be. Whatever. We can take the opportunity to educate them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, this is what I try and tell people. I said sometimes, a lot of times people are calling 911 just because they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea. So when you come in and say, hey, here's, the realm of possibility of things that I'd be looking at, and then they're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I don't need to go then. I'll just call my doctor in the morning. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
right.
Cool. You had a
That's
great experience with the patient.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You cared for them,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and they made a decision on their own.
Well, because part of our job is emotional support. Plus, also you have those patients that may be dealing with a chronic problem, but you can have acute flare-ups.
Sure.
I mean, COPD, for example. I've had a patient recently with pulmonary sarcoidosis, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. And they kind of educated me on it. And, we were talking about the way it could be complicated by like diabetes and this and that. And I learned something from the patient, but they also learned something from me. Like, it's not our job to pass judgment. I mean, when it comes to knowing everything, I always fall back on doctors have specialties for a reason because there's so much to know, and even doctors don't know anything. So how on earth, as a paramedic, am I going to sit here and go, oh, I know everything, you don't need to go to the hospital, without blood work and scans?
Yeah. Yeah. The paragod syndrome is kind of,
Yeah.
I'm close to getting back to where I can get back on the street. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for my first cardiac patient so I can start sharing with them about all what I've been going through this year. And it is, you know, I miss the interaction. I miss the talking with the
Mm-hmm.
patient. I miss the stories. I miss, like we had, I've had a couple patients with who were in some of the concentration camps in World War II, and to be able to talk to someone in that sphere, and even if you take that away, I remind people that you have a ringside seat to potentially the worst moment of this particular person's life multiple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If that can't stimulate you to want to perform better, learn more, be more compassionate, be a better human being, then dude, leave.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go to PetSmart and wash poodles or something. I just,
Daniel, learn to go grow carrots.
Yeah.
that's even
Look,
better.
as much as I hate, it's so funny. Daniel and I were talking about this morning. As much as I hate like the clusterfuck charts, like on the critical calls and stuff, I it I like giving death notifications, and I don't mean that in like a really dark way. But like, I don't mean that in a dark way. But like, I'm really good at leveling with family, and like, you were so mean. And
Mm.
like, giving that compassion, like, even though it's the worst day of that family's life, if you are good at it and you are genuine and you hold their hand, if they need a freaking hug, let them hug you. Like, there is something, even though it's so sad, there is something satisfying about knowing that we can make this really hard fucking day just, even if it's only like 0.5% better. Like, it's that one thing that we can do in the case of something that was completely, unpreventable, like something that, we couldn't fix.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are not good at giving death notifications. Like, if we're being completely honest, there's some people that aren't even good with psych patients and just giving that emotional support and compassion, which is something we have to be proficient in. I
I've
hate those
made,
charts though.
no, I get it. I made that scenario part
Mhm.
of our class where
Mhm.
I have the ladies in the billing department who are amazing actresses um, portray a family member, and my students have to come in and sit down with them and explain to them that their family member has died, and they will not give an inch. Like if I had one EMT student say, "Well, they've gone," and
Mhm.
said, "Well, where'd they go?"
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
what do you mean did they leave? I mean, I thought they weren't feeling well, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Because you're right, it's extremely important, and it's also extremely important to be able to speak clearly to that, because it's a respect thing. Because
Mhm.
they have to be able to grieve, you have to be able to give them the ability to. And if
Mhm.
you're, for lack of a better term, if you're pussyfooting around because you don't feel
Mhm.
comfortable, well, then you need to get over that shit,
Yeah.
and you need to figure out a way to be honest with them. So yeah,
Mhm.
I get
I gotta
it.
say,
You like doing that, so yeah.
I didn't mean it dark, but
No, I
I'm
totally
really
get
good
it.
at it,
So
unfortunately.
my well, so Michelle is definitely the black cloud of the two of us because I hadn't even heard about pulmonary sarcoidosis until this morning. And she's just talking about it like, this is what she had for breakfast. I was like, cool. Good for you. However, I have I've probably had to give well into the triple digits of death notifications.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many bodies I've had to handle. So to me, I, I I'm so emotionally disconnected from a death scene. I'm probably the least serious person there. Like, all right, obviously with family, I can get my game face on and all that stuff. But if we're just sitting around and just, dicking around waiting for the coroner and you've got, law enforcement there, maybe some firefighters stuck around, my favorite thing to do to break the tension, you know exactly where I'm going with this.
Oh.
So if you take your gloves off, as you're taking them off, fold one inside the other and kind of like straighten out the wrist portion of your glove and then tie it off. Well, then if you kind of take the open wrist end of the glove and fold it out, it looks like a purple starfish. And it is my favorite thing to just walk up to a cop and just be like, "Hey, man, what does that look like?" And they just have the look on their faces of "Holy shit, I should be laughing, but I really shouldn't be laughing. What the fuck do I do?" And I'm like, see ya.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. I have a core memory that I have to share for just 2 seconds.
Oh God.
So pretty much every county in the upstate, like the coroner handles like death and stuff differently. Well, I had one experience in a county that I did not know that the coroner themselves drove a truck with an open cab into the bed of the truck that housed a stretcher. And I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. So, the coroner came out, she did her thing, and she's like, okay, we're gonna load the body. And I'm like, what? It's just you and me. She's like, yeah, let's go. And we load, the stretcher into the back of her vehicle. And I'm like, but it's completely open into your cab. She's like, yeah. And I was like, okay. Well, fast forward to my current job, and I was on, a death scene with a coroner who also is a fire chief at one of the fire departments I've been stationed at. I know him very well. And we were all, we were cutting up joking, and I was telling him this story. And I was like, I asked her if she ever gets like this heebie jeebie feeling that like the body is going to like stiffen and like pop up like something out of The Walking Dead. And the fire chief looked at me, he goes, Michelle, that's so fucked up. I was like, okay, but how can you drive and not have like this inkling feeling that somebody is like watching you from behind, and then if something bad happens, they like pop up out of the bag? Like, it's an intrusive thought. I'm sorry.
No, hit it. I mean, that would be the first thing I thought of with an open cab like that. I mean,
Yes.
because
Thank
those
you.
zombies freak me out. All right.
Yes. Thank you. See, he feels me. He levels with me.
Because
I got you.
Like Shaun of the Dead, which is the funniest zombie movie ever.
Yes.
Okay. The first scene that you really see is an ambulance that's wide open with blood all over it, and the medic just got eaten. So,
yeah.
We're the first one dead. I mean, that's I actually had a double feature the other day. I watched Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and I felt a lot better about my life. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So I think that one of the things, and death is one of those interesting things with EMS, and I don't think the other services have the same sort of realization about death as we do. Especially because you said, Dan, that like you're pretty comfortable on a death scene because you've been around it so much, and we have been so inured over the years to see death in all its various forms, and I don't approach it from like a voyeuristic thing, but there's a comfort level I think nowadays because I've seen it singularly, I've seen it in a mass concept, and it's all very profound and everything like that, but this is one of those things that you have to adapt to, otherwise your career is going to be very short. I mean, I had a student in New York that we had a suicide, and I came up and pronounced, and I brought him up with me so he could view what we were seeing, and the gentleman who had killed himself had taken a 357 into his mouth and blown the back of his head clean. And so the student looked at it for a minute, and then he went downstairs, and I figured he had seen what he needed to see, and I came back to the truck, and he said, can you run me back to the station? And I said, yeah, did you forget something? And he goes, no, this isn't for me, I'm going to go to sanitation. And I had a tremendous amount of respect for the kid, because setting yourself up in a career where you're going to see stuff like that semi-regularly, realizing that you're built for that, it's a mature thing, and he probably saved himself a lot of like grief and sleepless nights and nightmares and stuff like that. So a lot of, but the rest of us, we buy in for this, and circling the mental health thing again, we have to find ways to effectively deal with that. And I have been around plenty of partners who dealt with it in the worst way possible, and some that dealt with it really good. And I don't think, and I used to have a bit of a different attitude, but I don't think it necessarily always means therapy. I mean,
Agreed.
I have guys that I work with who have told me that they will never sit down and talk to a professional. That is not something that they could even conceive of doing. Now things change, of course, and that may alter when certain things happen. And there are people, and look, I've done it. I had a therapist for a real long time, and it was effective, and it helped me through a horrific part of my existence. And but it's not one size fits all. and it's arrogant to think otherwise. But we do have to acknowledge that, signing up for this job, you take on this, it's not a burden, it's a horrible word, but you take on this onus of being that light for these people, and that comes at a price. So I don't know. It was a wrong way to say it.
I agree with you. I mean, to me, I've always been able to mentally separate from the job. I don't think that there's anything, I mean, yeah, I joke about being a white cloud, but like all of us, I've seen some pretty horrific shit and things that I would not care to see again. But none of that for me is what pushed me into therapy. It was completely unrelated other shit. And I can't help but wonder, and Michelle has championed this topic for a while, that a lot of people who truly need therapy in EMS don't need therapy because of EMS. They need therapy because of completely different things. And I would argue that therapy, while sometimes it's something that you need to be in for, years upon years, it's not always that way. You have a good therapist who is giving you tools so that you can save yourself, so to speak. I think is the ultimate goal of doing any therapy.
And honestly, if you're getting into therapy for someone else to save you, you're never going to succeed. Ultimately, it does have to come internally. It's the same thing with an addict. You can't force an addict to become clean. They have to choose to do so internally. We have to be our own saviors. And when you have somebody that's looking at therapy or a relationship or whatever to save them, it is going to be destined for failure.
Absolutely. 100%. The best therapists, the best coaches, the best trainers, the best, all that want you to get to the point where you don't need them because you've developed and saved yourself, for lack of a better word. Yeah. Anybody sign up for a 20-year contract for therapy or training or anything like that, they're selling you something. They're not trying to get better.
Yeah. Well, since we're on this roll, I know we were going to jump to education and then to men's health and EMS, but I kind of want to jump to because mental health and men's health and all that kind of all runs together. And you're a dude, I'm a dude. We have mental health needs and everything, just like everybody else. And I'm not meaning this as excluding females. We have had multiple conversations on both ends of the spectrum.
Well, in general, I feel like women, and I don't mean this in a hateful way, but women tend to whine about their health and their mental health more, and men tend to downplay it. And especially in public service, everyone tends to downplay their mental health. So I'm down for a penis conversation. All about the man. Sorry, I couldn't help it. It was wide open.
And that's what he said.
Oh my God.
So let's start unpacking it from the mental health side, because I know this is a shocker to some people in the world, but men and women are different. And men process stress and trauma differently. And we have different kinds of coping mechanisms. But I feel like we also, a huge problem that adds to the culture problem that we have in EMS is we're very isolated. Men are either encouraged to overshare their feelings and to no productive end, or they share their feelings and they're criticized and ridiculed for it. I feel like there's not really a good in between. But as far as for managing your, mental health as a guy, what are the things that you have found to work the most? And what are the things that you wish you could see implemented on a broader scale for people that were not doing well?
I think that having options, in the sense that, having therapy for people who want it, having other resources for people who can't look at therapy as an option, knowing that, you can't sometimes fit a square peg into a round hole. You can't make anybody go to therapy if they're not willing to sit down and actually talk, because then it's self-defeating. And I think the source of it is important, because and I'm going to be careful. I'm not knocking the people that I'm going to be referring to, but the common thread in our county is that the county service that provides counseling and stuff like that, no one will go anywhere near, because nobody feels that their privacy is going to be respected in there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't.
Yeah.
And so in this very narrow thing, I think that like a peer support group and stuff can be very useful, as long as it leads to something more official if it needs be. Because I'm the mental health resource officer for the department, and I stress to everybody that I am not a counselor, I am not a therapist, I don't have a degree in any of this. I just listen, and then I can point you in a direction that I think is going to benefit you the most. It may be simply talking to someone who does the same job you do and bouncing off some ideas that are really bothering you.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be. It may be something that you need to talk to a therapist, a priest, somebody that is going to allow you to sort of, like you said, develop your own way of healing. And it's harder. And I see it. The guys have a harder time with it, of course, because they're not supposed to be the ones that fall apart, that feel the stuff that different, and when they do, especially the younger guys, I don't know that they know what to do with it,
Yeah.
and they make some choices, So, it's as a field, we're not prepared to help our people the way it should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
I
know the
heard.
answer is completely what needs to happen, or how it needs to happen, but we're not
Mm,
ready. So,
I heard a very, I think, a very apt description of how men deal with their problems is, speaking very stereotypically, so people don't get their panties in a wad over shit. In general, women will tend to sit together and talk about the feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. They want to talk about it. They want to get it off their chest. Cool. Men are not wired that way. We're problem solvers, number one. Number two, we're not just going to sit around and talk about our feelings unless alcohol is involved. And even then, that's usually not a productive conversation.
no, it is
Now,
not.
don't get me wrong. I'm totally fine sitting back with a stogie and some scotch and having a good open conversation. But if you want men to actually productively solve their problems and communicate with each other, give them something to do. Give them something
Yes.
to build. Give them something to destroy. Something to attack. Something tangible that they can pull their problem-solving resources together, and then they can talk about shit. For the most part, and I
The
think
best the best conversations I've ever had with folks that wanted to talk to me were usually done after a workout.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or I had a few friends of mine that first responders that took jujitsu with me, and after you beat the snot out of each other for about an hour, you'd be surprised at how simply deeper conversation can happen. And it blew me away at first, because of like, these are people that there's that wall, but when you go through something strenuous, and it doesn't have to be, the worst thing in the world, but like a heavy duty workout, or you become like, and I know that they used to have they used to have a team that did the mud runs and everything like that. And that was a group that trained together, that worked really hard together, that supported each other. Like when you help somebody over a wall, an actual physical wall, then you're assisting them, and that helps them, especially guys, because you're saying, "Oh, here, I'm here to help you when you need it."
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree. There has to be something attached to it that allows them to sort of use energy, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of I don't know if I'm getting on a right path that way, but yeah, I agree. It's the only like one-on-one conversations that I've had with guys about what was going on is when it was usually really, really bad. It
Mm-hmm.
had gotten to a point where there was no other option. I need to talk to you, otherwise I'm going to do this, or I feel like I'm close to doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a couple times where I've talked to people, and I was able to be there as they talked themselves off that wall, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do anything. I just listened. But those are like extreme cases. But I think if you have that system set up to where, okay, a couple times a week, this group of guys is going to get together and do like a workout, or we're going to go shooting, or we're going to go fishing, or something like that. That's where all that conversation can flow naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, just as a couple, and figuring our own lives out, and both of us bring our own traumas from the past into and have to deal with that together as well as individually. And it's just so crystal clear to me that men, as a rule, care a lot less about being loved and a lot more about respect and being respected and being respectable. Not that love is not part of our equation, but it's a driving force for us. And that's why I think when men get together, and like you say, we're either doing some kind of physical exercise or there's some combat involved, there's a natural sorting that we do amongst ourselves, where there's a natural pecking order that we put in place. And you can have healthy competition and healthy respect in that pecking order while still building each other up too. And you know even if there's there's usually one person in the group who's like the respected one, the alpha of the group. But it's very easy to bring out those good respectable qualities in men when you're going through some kind of adversity together. And I can't help but wonder if maybe that's an element of it for guys, is part of us, some kind of therapy, whether it's professional or not, is we don't respect ourselves. And so finding that respect for ourselves is a big step towards solving a lot of those mental health problems specifically.
100%. Yeah, um I have probably the biggest case of imposter syndrome on the planet. I keep waiting for people to come in the job and say, "Okay, we figured it out. You're just basically a big old sham. It's time for you to go." You too? Okay. All
Oh,
right.
yeah. Yes.
We're going to get to that.
Slap me with the definition.
I don't take compliments well.
Mm-mm.
I don't take any sort of recognition well. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
and to that point of what you were saying, I know that my wife loves me. I know that like the people I work with in their own way love me and care about me and everything like that. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that, but I do spend probably too much time worrying about if I'm doing the right thing at the right time, and as I'm representing not only myself but the department well when I go out and speak, or I go out in public and I'm doing this stuff like that. That's a
Mm-hmm.
huge concern. And it's, when I go and speak at these conferences and stuff, and I'm just like, man, I'm just waiting for somebody to go, dude, you're fucked. We know all about you now. You're nothing. And I keep waiting for that dude. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not a real great way to live. I will admit it. And like, my friend Walt, who has this other podcast, that the Distinguished Savage, and it's brilliant, just like yours. And he and I teach a lot, and we had taught this trauma medicine class, and it went well. A couple people had said that it was probably the best medical class they had ever had, and I can't hear that
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
I can't be that person that taught something that's the best ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because all I sit there and think, dear God, you've had some horrible teachers then, dude. Because if I'm doing it, then
Oh my
that
God, that's my
can't
internal narrative.
be. So here, that's my struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and No, see, and it's funny because like when I get up, and it happened right before this too. When I get up to speak, when I get up to do something like that, I have this intense wave of nausea. Because I'm like, I'm gonna screw this up. I'm just gonna do this, and it's gonna be awful. They're not gonna show this episode. They're gonna burn it. They're gonna send it down. you know. But I found that if I don't have that wave of nausea, it doesn't go as good as if I do. I don't know if that
Hmm.
makes any sense at all. That goes
It does.
deep into my. Okay.
I first of all, I get that. Like leading into literally anything. Sometimes even normal classes when I'm like, okay, I'm familiar with this topic, I'll get like this it, intense anxiety, and but as soon as I start talking, it just goes away. And honestly, I tell my students this all the time because I just had them Friday, yesterday. I'm like, hey, we're doing a class activity one by one. You're going to go up in front of the class and present a medical assessment. And I can't tell you how much crying happened on Thursday and upsetness, and they were freaking out. And you know what? Most of them said that they had anxiety until they got up to the board and then they were fine. And I tell them that they have the anxiety and the nausea and stuff because they care. If you didn't care, you would go up, you fly by the seat of the pants, and you're just like, okay, cool, I'm done. That was fun. Like, bye.
Hmm.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, doesn't make me feel any better, but I get
Same.
it.
Listen. I can tell my students the same thing all day, but do I listen to my own advice? Not very often.
Oh,
Well, and I think
No.
it especially there's kind of a misconception that men are not anxious or not supposed to be anxious. And
right.
I think it's more of we experience the emotion. We just process it differently. Because like you said, we're not supposed to fold. We're not supposed to
Mhm.
be vulnerable and Michelle will be the first person to tell you vulnerability is still a struggle for me just because it's just I will literally start to stutter. Like it will get that intense, the mental resistance to being vulnerable and being open because, and it's not even just to try to project strength and security. It's for my own well being. I got to keep it together. I can't
Yep.
sit and focus on shit. I have to push through it. I think that's where we struggle a lot is knowing when it's okay to let it out and when you just got to muscle through it and deal with it later.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. And especially in this field because so much of what we do ends up not being successful. Because if we base the worth of our career on survivability, then inevitably we're going to fall apart because all of our cardiac arrest patients, the vast majority of them don't make it. The ones
Mm-mm.
we try to do all this stuff and it doesn't work, or we can't gauge our level of success as a medic on all these outcomes because we would run away screaming. It's tough. I mean, there's not this constant sort of affirmation that what we're doing is great because people are dying, and
Mhm.
or less than favorable. So I get it completely what you mean, and so we constantly have to just say, okay, on to the next one, and just we don't sit there and talk about it a lot. We just keep progressing through and cycling through until there's a point, I think, for everybody where it stops because you can't go any further.
Mm-hmm.
And either you get something that's going to help you process this,
Mhm.
or you start bad habits.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
You
On on the side of patient outcomes, I think something that I would like to see happen more is being able to follow up with patient outcomes like at the hospital level. And some agencies
Yeah.
have a really good connection with like the hospitals and stuff, and some it's still kind of a work in progress. Because like it for the most part, like Daniel and I've talked about, I don't take patient outcomes to heart. I don't often think poorly about myself because of all things, although I have imposter syndrome. I am confident in my I'm confident in my education, like that I did to my best, the best of my ability. But there have been some calls over the years, particularly since becoming a medic, that I'm like, I fucked up. Like I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. Like I screwed up. And several of those calls we've shared, I had an RSI that kind of fell to shit. We've shared that call. But what really helped me was not even necessarily talking about the call. Ultimately, it was getting the follow up of the patient to find out what the underlying like issue and long-term outcome was. And oftentimes if it was something that even if they were in the hospital when they had that medical emergency that they still would have died or had, such and such outcome, it at least for me, I don't know about y'all, but at least for me, it helps on that front for coming to terms with, hey, I know like this call didn't go as perfectly as it could have, but it didn't affect my patient's outcome. And if my patient died, it's like, okay, well, this was the underlying cause. Hey, she had 3 brain bleeds. There's nothing you could have done to make this any better or
Yeah.
worse, in theory.
Yeah. And you'd be surprised at how much that makes a difference. I mean, well,
Mm-hmm.
obviously you wouldn't because you're serious about it, but I mean, two instances come right to mind. We had
Mm-hmm.
called in one of our medics to talk about a call and the way that it progressed and just to get his mindset behind it. And he walked in with this massive chip on his shoulder because he was ready because being called in at a couple of the other places he worked at meant that he was in a ton of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal in this conversation was not punitive; it was
Mm-hmm.
understanding, and it was like allowing him to sort of like talk about why he viewed what he did as the necessity of it. And at the end, we were like, "So this is you did real well," and he's like, "I don't know what to do here." He goes, "I came in here
Mm-hmm.
off," and I said, "No, no, no, no." I said, we understand who you are. We know the type of medic you are. This
Mm-hmm.
call would have screwed anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and we just wanted to see good. And then
Mm-hmm.
last night, I don't want to I don't want to give out too much of her information because she's still dealing with some stuff. Last night, I spent about an hour on the phone with a young lady who is dealing with some stuff. She had 2 calls, 2 pediatric calls that were horrific,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean bad. And she was not processing it well, but we talked through both of them, and of course, being here and not there, it didn't sound like she could have done a lot more in the context of what she was doing. And she said that that morning she got a call from the nurse in the intensive care unit at the hospital that she brought both kids to, and the nurse said, if you didn't do what you did, they'd both be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And they both have a very long road ahead of them, but they're both alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to her, I said, because she's been a medic, I think, for 2 years now, and she had some experiences in EMT. And I said, this doesn't feel like this right now. I said, but this is a win.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is probably the finest thing that you can hear. I said, because you are experiencing the fact that we get called when this stuff happens. You performed at a high level. You got your patient to definitive care, and
Mm-hmm.
they're both expected to make recovery. I said, it doesn't get much better than this. I said,
Mm-hmm.
there's not trophies, not newspaper articles, there's not accolades, there's not stuff like that. But you've been told by someone at a higher medical level that
Mm-hmm.
what you did mattered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I said, it sounds like you're not realizing this yet, but you won this round.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I never. So yeah, it's and it's helping them. That is a mental health thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
That is just listening, reminding them that they called you to do this and you did it and it went well. So hey, chalk that one up.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen like that. So
Mm-hmm.
It's
yeah,
kind of the difference between perception and perspective. Your perception of a situation may be you're sitting there, and you don't have to have imposter syndrome to be like this. I think imposter syndrome is just a worse version of it, where you are stuck in your head with all the things that you think you did wrong. or that you could have done better or different, or things that you could have done faster. And it's the most humbling thing to me is to go back and look at the timestamps of a call and be like, God, did it really take me that long to do shit? But so our perception, our myopic perception is XYZ. But being able to step out of that and gain the perspective of, okay, but in the grand scheme of things, what happened? Patient benefited. Awesome. That's what like you said, that's a win. That is all that matters. We're not definitive care. We are not the be all end all. We just got to keep them alive, or as close
Yep.
to it as we can, and everything else will
Right.
sort itself out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Switching gears to education, because I think especially the two of you naturally gravitate towards it very much.
Sorry.
And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not cut out to be a formal educator. It is not my cup of tea. I don't enjoy it. Sure, I don't mind coming in, helping out with hands-on labs and stuff like that. But you want to stick me in front of a classroom, teach people, not your guy. Just not my thing. But
I would love to bring to lecture to my class one day. I would drag you in and just put you in there and say, "Look, just said, all right."
Well, okay.
I will help you kidnap him.
Okay, let me
Thank you.
clarify that. On certain things, yes. When it comes to these topics of leadership and culture and personal development, bringing all of that to bear in EMS, I will talk to a fucking brick. Like I'm totally fine with that. As far as being a clinical educator, there we go. Maybe that's the better term. I don't eat, sleep, and breathe medicine. I do my best to stay competent, to stay up to date. But I am just not. I am just not the clinical education person. I take it seriously. I think it's important.
No, I was just thinking about me wanting to argue with Grok AI this morning about sick sinus syndrome.
Well, so I've told her, because Grok has an actual like a doctor mode. And for the most part, it's actually pretty fucking accurate.
It was pretty cool.
And I had to keep reminding her, like, honey, the AI is predominantly based in general medical knowledge, not EMS specifically. So no, we don't do this thing, but I'm sure there's physicians somewhere that do.
Except for certain medications, that sick sinus syndrome is literally contraindicated, and Grok AI said, "Yes, please."
Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just giggling because I was arguing with AI this morning.
Again.
So obviously, COVID completely shit on everybody when it came to education on all fields. What do you see in that time frame since COVID hit? And I think all COVID did was actually pull back the curtain and kind of expose the weaknesses of the system. It didn't make anything bad. It just simply showed, hey, here's your weak points. You can't handle this shit.
Yes.
But in the aftermath of that, what are the problems we've had with education? But what do you see as the good things that have come out of this that are bettering EMS education across the board?
Okay. So whether it's going to be a long-term solution, at least it's laid out the idea of the concept of the hybrid class, in the sense that, you know, what we're doing doesn't necessarily have to be a brick and mortar thing full time. If you have the right student, and big if, capital I, capital F, if you have the right sort of student who is motivated enough to do a lot of the work on their own from a theoretical concept, then you can go a long way with it. I think that, we had those classes during COVID where there were students that got through this thing and never physically touched a patient. And hopefully, I'm not trying to debride anybody. Hopefully, they're all gone. I would rather them never have to be in this field, because they're tainted. Okay, I mean, they to never have a physical contact with a patient, and it's the certifying body's fault, not theirs, but to willingly say to this person, okay, you're good to go, even though you've never physically touched the patient, it's an abomination, in my humble opinion. And because we don't, I mean, we're not getting people that are going to go to Harvard and sit in a classroom for 4 years and get a degree in economics. We're dealing with people that are different styled learners, okay, that will function better when they can get their hands on something, or like that. I mean, and that's why when they go out on the street and they do ride time, or they're doing their skills and they're getting their hands on and doing it, there's a better outcome. I see this with my students when I can put them down in the skills lab and say, okay, this is what you're going to do for the next hour. Let's work on this. And you see the progression, right? And what we've been trying to push is the idea of concepts. Okay, not just memorizing by rote, like, okay, like we do. Okay, so we got to learn A, B, C, D. No, let's talk about a subject. Let's talk about the respiratory system. Let's talk about it as a whole. And when you do this, this is what happens. And when this happens, because one of the things that I love to say, and if any of my students listen to this podcast, at this point, they're going to start cringing and their fingers are going to tighten and they're going to throw up the middle finger. And I say, it depends. Because my favorite thing.
Are you thinking about the board?
I was thinking you, that's just what you tell your students all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So you understand, because
Yep.
the beautiful part about medicine is there's so few absolutes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, that's amazing. Why would you want something so predictable every day? I mean, so and there's a responsibility to say that, by the way, because if I say it depends, I have to be able to tell why it depends. Yeah, I can't just be able to say it depends, walk away. I think that it made it so the instructors have to be really on their game when they're teaching these concepts, because now that the registry has done away with the psychomotor in all the certifications, okay, like this first class for me, this last one that just graduated, was the first one that I had to sign off on my name that they were all able to do the skills as an EMT. And I sat there for a minute thinking about it. If one of them screws something up and says it's because my instructor Brian Collins didn't teach me right, then that's all on me, And I remember the arguments for and against getting rid of the psychomotor, and look, you and I both know
intense.
that there are going to be out there that pencil whip stuff through and push people through. And that terrifies the crap out of me.
I ran into this too with some of the medic ones that we proctor, like some of the oral boards. It didn't give a whole lot of leeway that as long as they didn't hit any critical fails, you would have to pass them. And I'm like, okay, but what if they just suck at this? Okay, they technically on a technicality passed and they didn't hit any critical fails, but if you treat it like a patient like this in the field, then they're dead. I hated a little bit of that aspect as well, because okay, well, a student could pass on a technicality, but it doesn't mean that they're proficient. And you would argue that they're supposed to be proficient by the end of class, but then that gets into the intrinsic drive to commit to learning it. I mean, I have people that actively want to be in my current class, and then they get into it and they're not willing to participate in lab days. And, no matter how much resources or time I offer, you can't make them do something. And then you get to testing and it's okay, well, they technically pass, but it's it's not great.
Yeah, the motivation on students seems to be very different. And
yes.
I have lost a few students in the sense that I don't, I will be kind of blunt with them in the idea that your participation is not optional in this one, because this translates out to you participating on the scene. Because if you don't want to get in and get dirty and learn, in lab, then you're going to be lost when it comes to real life because you're trained to do it. So, and luckily the body that oversees us and everything will back me on the idea of removing a student if they don't want to do it. And I get there's a numbers game to it. There's things that statistically you want in every class, but there's a standard. I mean, we have standards. And there seems to be an overall thought to make things a lot easier to get through these classes. I'm against it. I mean, to be blunt about it, I think that if you want EMS to progress, you have to have people that are willing to progress with it or able to progress with it. And sometimes it's simply being able to go from EMT to medic. But like if you look at what North Carolina did last year, they greatly expanded the abilities of the EMTs and the advanced EMTs. Okay, they're allowing like advanced EMTs to do compressions and all this stuff, and the skill set has increased dramatically, which is great. And everybody's like saying, well, that devalues the paramedic and everything on. I said, well, if you're doing it right, then you're adding to the skill level of the paramedic too. I mean, this is how we progress as a profession. Yes, let's do more. But oh man, we're not going to be able to do more if we make it.
Oh yeah. Well, in this whole we're going to have 5-week EMT academies and 6-month paramedic academies. That is cringeworthy. It makes me want to die. Our paramedic program was 14 months, and honestly, it arguably could have been longer. And I still feel like I got a good, solid education. And this may be controversial, but let's be honest. Needle decompression, the indications, contraindications, and how to do it is not that fucking hard. It's not.
Right.
So, allowing EMTs to start IVs or, advance to do a needle decompression, that's fine. I would argue that the skill set of the paramedic is genuinely being the advanced clinician with medications, with disease processes, all the rest of it. Allow everybody to work at a much bigger scope of practice. What?
Michelle, you're singing my song.
Listen. I wholeheartedly. Oh God.
Verbal stroke.
Yes, verbal stroking. I wholeheartedly believe in this. I love the pathophys and the medicine, and I mean pharmacology. Oof, chef's kiss. I love the pharmacology.
I think that EMTs should be allowed to do IOs. Not that they're going to ride in the call. Not that it's going to be their patient. But I'm sorry, that is one skill that the way it goes in real life, the way it feels, is exactly how it is in lab. There is zero difference, in my opinion, between how it feels IOing a mannequin versus a person, other than the fact that the person's a little more squishy before you get to the bone. That's it. Let the EMTs do that. That's a monkey skill that's high enough frequency they can learn how to do it.
He's smirking.
I will tell you. I believe that the initial certification should be advanced EMT.
Oh, you two might have a difference on this one.
I think if you took the EMT program as it exists right now and added another 3 or 4 months, you could come out with a provider at the advanced level that could be the initial certification.
I would be okay with mushing them. I think that the advanced EMT as an in-between EMT and paramedic is a wasted extra step because most of the education they're getting, I feel like it's half an education. It's not that they're useless as providers. I don't think it's fair because a lot of times they know something's wrong. They know they need to fix it, but they don't have a full picture. And I don't think that's fair to them or the patient, especially if they want to fix it. They know something's wrong, but they don't have the whole information. So I don't inherently have an issue with combining the two with certifications and expanding the scope of the EMT, but treading lightly on how much we're expanding versus we're not.
No, and And I agree. I think that, like what Dan said, let them do IOs, let them do IVs, let them get a base understanding of what we're looking for, like on an EKG. Not to diagnose, not to,
Mm-hmm.
not in that realm, but it, because yeah, in the advanced program, the one that I taught, I felt ridiculous because it felt like I was just doing EMT class over again with IV stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was probably more of a reflection on me as an instructor rather than, the proper way to do it. It
Mm-hmm.
is it is a useful profession for sure. And that's why I think if we approached, because I think that's kind of what North Carolina did in an odd fashion. But I think that if we look at the EMT level as something that can be a more advanced provider, then we're doing the right thing. And
Mm-hmm.
again, your concerns are absolutely true. I think that, like, you can't expect someone who's coming in off the street and learning this stuff to be as seasoned as an EMT who's done this for a couple years and then goes to advanced school. You have to respect the level of knowledge and everything like that. But if we were willing to take a step back and look how we set that initial program up, I think it could work.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I had never thought about, like, absorbing EMT and just making. I know that other countries do something similar, but EMT has always been near and dear to my heart. So I guess I've never thought about what would a world be like if we just, you know, had not eliminated it, but upgraded it permanently and left it there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, my favorite EMT class. If I teach EMT class for the rest of my life, I'm going to be a happy human being. I think it's the most important thing to do because you're setting them
Mm-hmm.
up to be really good providers. That's super important. And all this implication is not to imply that the EMT position is not
Mm-mm.
the most
No.
important, because I kind of think it is. It's
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
I think it's just the fact that it can be more. I mean, and then if we talk about what happens with paramedics, man, then we got to talk about what happens in the Commonwealth and Australia and England and all that, because they're
Mm-hmm.
doing exactly what you're talking about. They're going into the field and they're prescriptions and they're doing evaluations,
Mm-hmm.
and they're actually clinicians.
Mm-hmm.
Dear God, isn't that what we should be doing?
I would freaking I would die if I got to do that. Like I'm all for it. And I'm with you. Like if I had to pick what I would teach for the rest of my life, I don't know if I would be able to pick between EMT or paramedic. Because, like, on the EMT front, if you have a good class that is like excited about medicine, I love that new excitement. They hold on
Fresh
to
meat.
every word. They want to hear your stories. They're fascinated by pathophysiology. Like, I love that new and excitement. But, you have to make sure that you're not talking over their heads. And I really like the advanced medicine. Well, let's go to paramedic, for example. I love talking the advanced medicine, the pathophys, the pharmacology. But you know what? Some of these little bitches need a smackdown when it comes to dick measuring and thinking that they know everything because they've been working in the field for a year. And I'm just like, listen, I'm going to throat punch you and you're going to listen.
Listen, Linda, listen.
Seriously, listen, Linda. Sorry.
We wake up and choose violence sometimes.
Oh, it's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So I don't know what to pick.
Oh, where have you been all my
So, oh no, I interrupted the pussy in my lap. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we have a lot of cats.
We got the kitty
We're
cat.
literally drowning in pussy in this house.
Listen.
So,
Sorry, there's a cat there. Scoot noodle.
switching gears slightly, but I think it goes with education. Talk to us about the human trafficking work you do, and specifically engaging EMS in that, because I think that's something we don't talk about nearly enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So about 4 years ago, I got involved with a group out of Texas called Gentlemen Incorporated, and it's a group that's made up of current and former law enforcement officers that do online sting operations against traffickers and stuff, a lot of intervention.
Hmm.
And what they wanted to do was to be able to provide education to the first responder community. So they got a few
Hmm.
people together and they did a train the trainer thing and then sent us out into the world. And so I started speaking to mostly EMS and fire, and it was pretty well received, although there were some stories. And I started going to conferences all through the Southeast, and I did a couple up in New York and everything like that. And so far, it's been received really well. And then I sort of introduced myself to the task force for the state, and I had to sort of be insistent because one of the first things that they said was, we never really thought of involving EMS in this, which, yeah, exactly.
No, okay.
And
Okay.
it, you know, which is arguably one of the stupider things that I've ever heard. And, the thing is, what I've realized over the few years is that there are so many people that uh, get a feeling about this stuff that have come up to me after I talk to them that, like, man, I felt something was wrong, but I didn't really know what to do, and stuff like this.
Hmm.
And I did a talk for the 911 dispatchers in Myrtle Beach last year, and this one young man was having a really hard time during the presentation, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, my cousin had gone through this, and it was everything that you talked about, and we just missed all the signs.
Hmm.
And it's heartbreaking, and it's one of the harder things that I ever do, because after I give these talks, I feel like I need to take a shower, because
Hmm.
Mm.
it's a brutal subject.
Hmm.
But luckily, the task force has been very receptive to the things that I have been trying to do. They've sent me out on a few things, and we have created, at least in the Catawba area, we've got a good group of people that are going and spreading the word. And now I'm getting into the general public, which has its benefits, but dear God, the lack of knowledge in the general public of this stuff is
Hmm.
terrifying. And uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's in a nutshell. So
I think there's a large portion of the general public that don't want to know. I mean, same with medicine.
yeah,
They don't want to know the ugly parts of society. And honestly, at least on the EMS side, I could
yeah,
imagine that part of it too is people being afraid to report something when it's not something. Because I hear that when it comes to like us being mandatory reporters for like abuse. It's like, okay, well, is the husband talking for the wife abuse, or is it like a culture thing? Is, just different dynamics and housing situations. There was one week, like, I don't know, 6 months ago, that Declan, our youngest son, like had three different accidents where he had like minor head trauma, including a black eye. And I'm just like, oh dear God, what if somebody from the outside accuses us of a child abuse when this child just doesn't know how to fucking walk because he has extra gravity on his feet? So I think too, getting educated on what to look for truly with signs and symptoms of human trafficking and stuff. We definitely need to know, because I think a lot of people may have suspicion, but they're afraid to report in case it's not it, and then we brought down law enforcement on this poor innocent whoever.
right. And
Sorry, we have
so, like,
neighbors
one of
knocking.
my
Y'all keep talking.
You're good.
okay, one of my medics called me last week because he had some very valid concerns about a patient that he had.
Hmm.
He brought her to the ER, and um,
We'll send them over in a little
the
bit.
doctor felt the same way. And so he called me, and I advised him to get law enforcement involved. Well, the law enforcement individual that he called ended up not being willing to take a report.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
Yeah. And so I called, yeah. And so you understand why they would feel
Hmm.
that way. And so I got
Hmm.
on and called the because if you call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, you can
Mhm.
start like a report like we would do for like abuse, and
Mhm.
there's more of a because this young lady had been brought from Iowa and gone through a few different states before she wound up in South Carolina. So bringing a minor, if trafficking is involved and you're bringing a minor across state lines, it's automatically a federal issue.
Oh yeah.
So I told him, I said, I don't need some local cop not doing their job to um, do something with this. So we called and we filed the report and everything, and now I'm waiting for them to follow up. But that's
Mhm.
happened a few times, and
Mhm.
so to what you said, the frustration level at being ignored sometimes is
Mhm.
it's noticeable, and I understand completely.
Is there any training that you do or your company does that like maybe could help
But
educate us on things to look for?
sure, patterns that don't fit are always one of those things. Like when you have kids that are of that tender age, like the preteen and everything like that, a lot of times things that patterns and stuff that they do, like being willing to toss a cell phone. I'm not sure how old your kids are. I don't know if they have cell phones or anything like that. But a lot of kids that I know, when they get a cell phone, it is the most important thing in their life. Okay.
Mhm.
Some of these kids that are being trafficked are given 2 or 3 burner phones, and
Mhm.
when they're confronted by law enforcement, they will talk. That's an aberrant behavior. I mean, you don't expect that. Things that they might be
Yeah.
carrying on them, because if they don't have ID, okay, maybe they're under the age of 16, maybe they won't have a driver's license or anything like that. But when you have a kid who's carrying in their backpack 4 or 5 prescriptions, okay, and you look, and we're always taught to look at the amount of the pills and how often they're supposed to take them and all that
Mhm.
jazz. Well, look at the names. If there's 4 or 5
Mhm.
different names on the bottles, then something isn't adding up right.
Mhm.
If they're with an adult that doesn't have like a familiar pattern, if there's
Mhm.
not that affinity there, if there's a fear component, are they, and like you said, is the adult talking for them, is the adult getting in the middle of care, these
Mhm.
sort of things. Because a lot of what gets put across in Hollywood, while it's not completely untrue, it has so little to do with the reality of trafficking. Because
Mhm.
then one of the biggest pushbacks I get is that statistically, about 75% of kids or even adults that are brought into trafficking are brought in by someone that they know,
Mhm.
not by some dude in a van or
Mhm.
something like that. It is family, boyfriends,
Mhm.
friends, stuff like that, and it's terrifying. I just did a presentation with a woman who's now a counselor. She got away from that life, and um, if you ever get the chance to hear her story, it's amazing. But she was in a position down in Texas where her trafficker had asked her to take a car from one spot to another, and there was, of course, narcotics in it. But along the route, she thought maybe this is a really good time to get away, right?
Mhm.
But she was so hopeless about being able to get away from them, she ended up driving off an embankment, and she went down
Mhm.
about 30 feet, and she had to get airlifted out. She fractured her back and both of her legs, and all this stuff. And she spent a month in a teaching hospital in Austin, okay? And she was branded by these people, okay? At no time in the 30 days from the point of EMS contact to the point of discharge from the hospital was any inquiry made into her social existence and how she got to that point with the narcotics and the branding and everything that happened that led up to what was going on. And if that isn't a condemnation on the healthcare field
Mhm.
and what we're doing,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I get enraged by this stuff. It
Let it out.
Yeah,
because
no,
We're here for it.
yep.
I I tell them that I can't teach people compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you're born with or not, and sometimes it gets dulled, and sometimes it blossoms when you're around the right environment. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can muster up enough compassion for someone who, in a 20-minute window, may make all the difference in the world, about even if they're not willing to talk to you, they may be willing to talk to the next person in the ER or something like that, because they talk
Mm-hmm.
about, like, statistically, a trafficking victim is about 68 to 70% likely to wind up in an emergency room for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how that translates out into ambulance transports, but just think about the opportunity we have. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if we're educated enough and to know what to look for and how to speak,
Mm-hmm.
without making judgments, without passing judgments, because unfortunately, these kids or these adults come across in a culture that's predominantly looked down on by society, whether it's prostitutes or drug
Mm-hmm.
addicts or alcoholics and stuff like that. But the people we have the most contact with in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So can we muster up enough compassion to be there for them? That's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of confirmation bias in dealing with
Mm.
them, preconceived ideas of what these patients are going to be like. It goes a long way. So we talk a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say if we wanted to organize a class with either of our jobs
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit.
to sorry, if we wanted to organize a class, let's say, a day long or a 2 day long class or however long,
Oh,
for our organizations, and bring you or, somebody affiliated with what you're doing in, is that something that you guys are set up for? Is that already what you're doing, or is that something that can be orchestrated?
um, I've gone and done like 2 hour like blocks of education at departments, and I'll go anywhere. I mean, and I have a certain amount of leeway with my department that as long as I'm in state, I can go to departments and I can talk about stuff like this, and I'm more than willing to do it at the drop of a hat. I love doing it. And a lot of times it's tied in with like departments, like in service stuff. Like if they're doing a day long in service, then I'll take a small chunk of it and do it and talk. And um, with certain stuff that's been worked on lately, I can add more like situational awareness stuff and talk about that. But yeah, I'm happy to come and talk. It's one of those things that's going to define the rest of my career, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
yes, and I
especially
see the
since
bubbles in your head, and yes, just let me know when. So,
well, and we don't, we can talk offline the details, but, as far as our jobs and whatnot. But I mean, Michelle's in a position to orchestrate something like that,
Mm-hmm.
at, one of the larger services in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got connections at other places around here that would be. I mean, I'm sure you have plenty too, but just as far as like bringing it to the street level, not just,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a elite access, I guess. I think that's something that would be really
uh,
cool to push for up here.
that'd be great, and I make it a point to make it a very digestible thing. This is
Hmm.
not higher education sort of stuff. This is being on the street and using your instincts and
Mm-hmm.
looking
Hmm.
for those red flags, and that's um, because like if we're talking to, and this is not a knock, but if you're talking to law enforcement and fire and stuff like that, it has to be plain speak.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
We can't burden anybody with like, oh well, if you understood the socioeconomical blah blah blah. No, look, these are the folks that you're going to run into. This is what we can talk about, and signs like tattooing is one of those big things. Like certain
Mm-hmm.
tattoos are indicative of certain things, and places that you may be more likely to run into situations like this. And then usually there's, like, we talk about the labor trafficking stuff, which doesn't get anywhere near enough attention because the sexual component of it is usually the one that is most and I hate to use this term, but it's the most marketable when they talk about trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
But labor trafficking, especially in South Carolina, is profound.
Mm-hmm. I believe it.
Yeah. So the white elephant in the room that is on everybody's minds is the Epstein files debacle. And I don't want to get into politics because nobody gives a shit and it doesn't do any good, and we don't know actually what's going on with that. So that is what
Right.
it is. Tell me, if it has this situation over the years had any repercussions on what you're doing, and especially now with what is being presented to the world about Epstein? Is this detrimental to your efforts in any way?
I think it's very detrimental in the sense that, whenever someone is the victim of sexual abuse, there is this always a question of whether they're believable or not,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
which is a horrible thing. And, and yes, there, of course, in every aspect, there are people that manipulate stuff and say things that turn out to be not true. But the victims are put through horrors just trying to get their story out and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that has been festering for a number of years, and for probably various reasons, it's never fully been exposed. And now it looks like it's going to be shoved somewhere in New Mexico with the aliens at Roswell or something. And it diminishes everything, I think, because it implies that what happened to these kids is not as important as keeping people's names clean. I think that it's going to hinder efforts going forwards on prosecuting people who do this. I think that it's going to diminish the level of care that people express about people going through this, because no one will get convicted. I mean, there's a reason that drug dealers have been getting out of drug dealing and going into human trafficking, because the chances of them getting prosecuted are much less than being narcotics dealers.
And profit is much higher. I've heard.
Profit is much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the United States for decades has been the biggest consumer of trafficking victims in the world. This is a case of slavery, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And people think slavery is gone. No, slavery is at an all-time high in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that we're ever going to really get the magnitude of harm that is coming from this. I can't imagine what the people that have already come forward and testified about what happened to them. I can't imagine what they're going through right now. To just the trauma that they are dealing with now, being told that what happened to them never happened to them, and then there's and the fact there are going to be people that are going to take what was the ruling and everything like that, and they are going to just accept it.
Mm-hmm.
It oh my God.
Well, because has it been announced that everything against Diddy has been dropped, or is that official?
I think the P Diddy cases, I think he was exonerated or let go or dismissed or whatever.
Yeah, which that's
he from what I remember, he got charged with 2 counts of prostitution, like promoting prostitution, but the trafficking and and he may do some minimal jail time, but it wouldn't surprise me at all, especially now that he didn't do anything. And see, that's the thing. It's like, whether you look at the conspiracy theory of everything, and whether you uh, whether you buy into the whole breadth of the conspiracy theory, um, does that mean that everything that you bought into all that time now never existed? I mean,
Mhm.
people have been screaming about the Hollywood elite or these elite and everything like that being able to do what they want,
Mhm.
and now that all goes away. I mean, are these people going to apologize? I mean, is like, is that Ghislaine Maxwell? Is she going to get out of prison now? I
Mhm.
mean, you know,
Mhm.
and now they're saying that two of the high-ranking officials in the FBI may be stepping down over this. But again, that's all conjecture now, and who knows
Yeah.
what's going
Mhm.
to happen. But
Mhm.
I think that what's happening, unfortunately, is that the ruling has been taken up as a political thing, and
Mhm.
no one is mentioning the victims. And I may be over assuming, but I have not heard anybody speaking out for the victims saying, "What are we doing for these people?"
Mhm.
And I'm waiting on a local level. I'm waiting for people in this task force to come out against this whole thing, and I've made some inquiries in, and I want to hear something on my
Mhm.
end where people are saying, yes, this is unacceptable. This is not something that um, I'm going to tolerate. Uh, it has changed a lot for me,
Mhm.
I mean, because I have always been a dude that has looked at the government, no matter who is in power, with a degree of distrust, and now I'm pretty much done.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of faith, um, because it comes down to, if we're not taking care of our people, if we're not looking at taking care of the people in this country and their needs, especially during this time, then what are we doing at all?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm not having a good time with this. It is a struggle, and then because I used to talk about how the fact that ICE was one of the leading government agencies dealing with human trafficking, and what am I supposed to say now?
Mhm.
You know, I mean, and it's like, uh, it's just, oh my god, dude.
Well, and it's frustrating because we have had some good wins from ICE and the FBI when it comes to addressing, you know, child prostitution and a numerous other. There's been a lot of wins lately, and
Yes,
so I don't want to take away from that, and I'm very glad that we have that. But me personally, looking at and I'm by no means a body language expert or whatever, but looking at the FBI leadership dealing with this, they both look like hostages when they're talking about it.
Mhm.
I
yep,
I and I think that Dan Bongino, especially the current assistant director of the FBI, everything I have seen and heard of him leads me to believe that he is a man of character. And like you said, some of the rumors of who's stepping down or whatever. I personally think I think the best way that this situation could be redeemed in some way, shape, or form is if Bongino basically violates all of his security clearances and says, "Hey, here's what's happening. Here's what I've seen. Here's the truth. Take me to jail." Like I want to give it all up, and and you guys can sort it out from there. As far as justice being done, I feel like something to that degree would maybe partially save this. Of course,
yeah,
then the aftermath of that is a whole other
Hot mess.
nightmare.
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's eroded a lot of confidence in a lot of people that this is important to. I mean, we um, because there's a safety aspect of it. I mean, you have kids, I have a daughter,
Mhm.
and I've spent a lot of time talking to my daughter about, like, the people that are there to help, and who we can trust and who we can't. And these things happening changes a lot of ideas. And it's when people that are at my lectures start talking some odder theories on who started this and why did this person stop it and all this. I mean, because a blanket guilt overthrew the entire government on both sides is kind of obvious. I mean, there's not one side that's clean in this. This is a filthy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not a somebody that I look at in the government saying, okay, they're completely clean. Now you're right. He's been speaking a lot on this list and it coming out and all the processes that have happened up until this point. And yeah, it would be really interesting to see if he actually did something like that. And that would be commendable. Probably not for his career going forward,
No.
but as a human being, it would be very commendable. I am curious now as to what the feel in the community is going to be when I go out and present again. I'm going to be doing an open forum in a couple weeks here in Lancaster with the general community, and I'm really interested to see what people are going to have to say. It is because the last few talks I've done, I had people line up to talk to me, which in the imposter syndrome realm, I can't understand for a minute. But and they're telling me their stories and they're talking to me about like what they think they've seen and stuff, and I'm really curious, maybe a little concerned about how that's going to go now. Are people that are going to come and talk about this stuff, are they going to be viewed with a certain degree of suspicion because of this? It's far reaching. I don't know. To say that I'm completely caught off guard by this would not be a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we can, at this point, wish for the best, and as always, expect to self-rescue and
Yep.
teach our kids to be little savages and stick up for themselves and
cussing and throat punching.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, my daughter is going to be able to rip the hearts out of chests. That is going to be the goal. Yes.
Let's go. Let's go.
Well, Brian, it's been wonderful. My phone is actually about to die, so unfortunately, to avoid us getting cut off completely, I need to go ahead and wind us down. But I really
do it again.
Yes, I really do. We really appreciate your time. I think a lot of people are going to want to hear a lot of this, and I'm excited. Let's talk some more.
Yeah, whenever you want. Well, we'll talk off, I guess, or whatever. But yeah.
So, oh yeah.
But thank you.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much. It's nice meeting you.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.